This is Robert Kraft, and I'm your host on SNN.Network. And today we have an emergency Wall Street view. We're not have the big, red flashes of everything's going down and whatnot, but
Armageddon. It's
yeah,
Armageddon.
yeah.
You hear the sirens going off. Everyone's panicking. It's over.
It's over. Everything's over. But honestly, I'm glad to have my guests on today to help me make sense, at least somewhat, of what's been happening in the last, let's say, 10 days. So as some of you may know, I got Sam Namiri from Ridgewood Investments. Sam, how you holding up, man?
I'm okay. I'm still, not sick, which is good. Maybe sick to my stomach a little bit with all the red that's on the screen, but yeah, I think everything is okay for now.
For sure. It's funny. I feel like I've been screaming into a wall of what is all this going on? And look, we're small micro nano cap guys. It's not like we're constantly monitoring what's going on the Dow and NASDAQ on a daily basis, but this is too much to really ignore here. So let's try and make some sense of it. What are you seeing?
Making sense of the coronavirus. That is, I don't think those two words go well together. But I mean, I think there's just so much uncertainty out there. Like no one really knows what's going to happen and, how it's all going to play out. Everyone is looking at China and seeing how they pretty much shut down their pretty much everything for 6 weeks or so. China's a huge place. I think it's really difficult to tell, what's going to happen in the U.S. I focus mostly on the U.S. and North America markets. So, all the stuff that's kind of gone on I don't think will have too much of an effect so far. I think it's more just the uncertainty of the future, what's going to happen 3, 6 months, a year from now. But bigger picture, I've heard things where this may turn into another strain of the flu. But barring that, I don't think that, I think 2 years from now, we're going to look back at this moment, and I don't think it's really going to have much of an effect on things. That's kind of what my logical mind tells me about, what's going on. So I think Buffett has a saying where he says, I like to invest in businesses, and if the market shut down for 5 years, I would still feel comfortable with the price I paid for the business and owning that business because I know in 5 years it'll be worth more. So I think now is the time to invest in those type of businesses where, you like the business and now the valuation is getting to a point where, it may still go lower. You have to be okay with it going lower from today's price. But if you bought it today and the market shut down for 2, 3, 5 years and it opened up back again, then, you'd be comfortable owning it. So right. I think that's the right way to think about it for a long-term guy.
Absolutely. What's interesting, just, if let's say let's put our trader hats on, so to speak, or even shorter term investor hats on. And, with some friends that I'm talking to offline, ones that are pretty savvy investors, not including yourself, but there is always this feeling of uncertainty, really, and it's really, the uncertainty being, they're really not sure what's going to happen. And this had nothing to do even with the coronavirus. And then once the coronavirus really hit and people are starting to see the potential global effects of this on, across all industries, now they can kind of pin that uncertainty potentially on that. Is this kind of that black swan event that we've all been, on the lookout for, that no one really saw coming?
I think so. I don't think anyone in November was talking about any virus pandemic. Really the biggest thing people ever talk about is the flu. Mm-hmm. And so this is, my understanding of it is that it's the flu. It spreads like the flu, but it's much more dangerous and, will kill, I don't know, anywhere between 1% to 2% of people who are infected. But again, it's still very early days. Most of the numbers are numbers that came out of China, which again, you don't know how real they are. There's a lot of differences between the demographics in China versus other countries as well too. So again, very difficult to tell. Like a country, again, I don't follow it too much and go too deeply into it, but Singapore, for instance, I hear, has done a great job in terms of handling this. I think they have more recoveries now than they actually have, new infections each day. So, they're recovering. I saw some headline yesterday that Starbucks is reopening their stores in China. So if that's the case, it's been about I don't know, 6 week to 2 month ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, going back to November, like nobody was talking about this at all. So in terms of Black Swan, I think this is, an event. um, but again, like it's interesting because the mainstream media talks about, oh, the biggest drop in the Dow points wise, for a very long time. But yeah, the Dow was also reaching, all-time highs. So
Right.
on a percentage basis, it necessarily isn't, the biggest drop ever. But on a points basis, because it was at the highest level,
Right.
that makes sense. So the mainstream media is obviously, trying to get eyeballs. They're trying to build attention to the story. When you walk down the street and see the average person still, in LA, for instance, most people aren't really affected, and aren't really worried about it. It's really just, I think, the panic of uncertainty that's going on out there.
Agreed.
So,
all right. So you alluded to this, after my first question, in regards to potential opportunities here, and I'm not here to name names or anything like that, but when we see these huge sell-offs and you see even large caps going down, 10, 12% from their 52-week highs. I mean, I forgot what stock it was, but in the same week it hit its 52-week high and now it's 52-week low. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, so just from a valuation perspective, I mean, from what I'm telling you, I mean, we're more in correction territory, but I mean, are we starting to see some valuations on, just across, all equities really starting to go down, but, really more fair value type valuations on some of these companies?
well, I'm not looking at the market as a whole
Right.
to see what's going on. I have like a list of maybe 20 companies that I really like, and that the valuation, if it gets cheaper, it's interesting. I find some things that are holding up well. So obviously there's still demand there, or maybe whoever owns it isn't selling their shares. But it ranges the gambit. I find stocks that don't trade much, and then maybe trade 100 shares at like 20% lower than they are, and then they go right back up.
Right.
So it's really hard. There are some things out there where you're like, this doesn't make sense. Like there's like a medical clinic company that I have an investment in, and if anything, the coronavirus would help them out. You would think,
Mm-hmm.
they'd get busier. So, and that stock's come off, around 15% already. So, yeah, I just don't understand. And I think on the other side of things, I think there's stocks where, or companies where, the coronavirus like helps them out, where, in an unfortunate circumstance, like it creates more demand for their product. They don't have the capacity to really capitalize on the situation. Like, for instance, like if you sell masks or you produce masks and all the masks are sold out, you can only make as much money as what you can produce.
Right.
So some of the valuations are just people are just buying the stocks, like just again, like as a trade, I don't know, or hoping someone else will buy it from you at a higher price, but on a logical valuation, like it doesn't make any sense. So I think there's opportunities there to like short those companies as well too, potentially. I don't really short much, but just kind of a thought I've been looking for to see if something goes just way out of whack. That may make sense to do.
Well, I don't know if you've seen this recently, but I've seen a few headlines come across in the small micro nano cap space of some biotech saying now working on a new coronavirus vaccine and whatnot, and just seeing some of these stocks just fly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be doing an interview a little later with a biotech analyst to kind of talk about that a little further. But what's your impression, real quick on that? I mean, it's really tough to sometimes sift through the noise and like, all right, these things take a long time, man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they take a long time. A lot of them don't get approved. So again, you would think like the FDA is not going to take the risk of approving a drug that hasn't been vetted to make sure at least it's safe, that it works. This may be a different situation, and I think it also depends on how bad things get, how bad the spread is in the U.S. In terms of that. But I don't know. Like the biotech guy will probably tell you, what is it? At least minimum like 6 months to a year before they get like full through the full process, even if it's fast tracked. And then how many drugs are going to go through that process? 5, 10, 20, 100. Like there's a lot of people who potentially can make a lot of money doing it. So a lot of companies are going to do it. And then how many are going to approve out of that number? So again, like on a probabilistic basis, like I'm just like thinking out loud here, but maybe shorting like a basket of those that have done that. I mean, the problem, I mean, morally, it's kind of doesn't feel right to you know go against something that you want to help. You want to help
Of course.
humanity. So that's why, I mean, generally, I like to go long on
Same.
companies. But I think again, like just looking back at that, it's kind of a similar concept. Is that I think in the long run, you have to bet on people figuring this out and humans doing the right thing and America doing the right thing. And I think because of that, again, if you have a long-term outlook, I think in 5 years, when you look back at this, you'll be like, wow, that was like crazy, and I don't know how things will actually pan out in the short term, but it may not even be a big. It has a range of outcomes here. It may not have like much effect in the U.S. at all, or it could be 1%, 2% of the population, unfortunately, gets killed by this disease. So, there is a wide range of outcomes here, but I don't see like a doomsday scenario in when you look back at this in 5 years.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha.
but again, things may change, and I think that's why everyone's panicking is because nobody really knows what's going on here. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I mean, look, you've gone through a few cycles like this where there is that, from the housing crisis, dot-com bubble, I mean, you've seen similar panics, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
Like what would you say is the best mindset to kind of put yourself in so that, you don't succumb to any of the classic mistakes that I'd say a lot of investors probably, end up doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that's really hard. That's a tough question because I've gone through some of the cycles, but this is not really a cycle
Right.
yet, at least,
Right.
Um,
Well, I guess I was more saying like from just the idea of those panic days. I mean, I use those as benchmarks because they're just kind of easy. But and there's been other days in between those time periods of crazy sell off days, and I mean, I remember Brexit. What was that? 5 years ago, 4 years ago now. Like that was a crazy sell off day. So like when these kinds of days happen, I mean, what should your mindset be so that you don't make a classic mistake?
I think your mindset needs to be that, you're if you like something and you like the price you're going to pay for it, that you're okay with it going lower if you're willing to pay that price today, because you don't know it still could go another 20%, 30%, 50% lower than it is today. But you have to be confident enough where, even the price you're paying today, it doesn't matter because again, in a few years or a year or whenever this mentality or everyone's frightenedness goes away, it'll be worth more, and things will be okay. Because at the end of the day, I think, again, looking out a long time from now, things will be okay. Like this isn't something that's gonna, wipe out humanity or destroy a country, and make the U.S. fall apart, for instance. So I think that's kind of the way to think about it. In terms of trading, one of the things that I've seen, like I think we talked about a little earlier, was that some stocks haven't really gone down very much, and so those ones, if something has been dropping and then starts showing some resiliency, I think that may be an interesting time to get in. I've been putting some orders in that are way lower below the price and that they're currently trading at, and occasionally they get hit. So in small shares. So what's interesting with the microcap space is that there's a lot of people out there who put market orders on illiquid stocks, and so when you put a market order, especially during a time of panic where you're just like, I
Right.
just want to get rid of it, and there's no buyer out there, the bid ask spread can be very, very big, and you can pretty quickly buy something on a discount. So that's happened a few times during these last few days with me. So I think if you can, that's somewhere where maybe there's opportunity in algo type trading in the microcap space, even though there's not much volume to do big dollar amounts. But yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, this is a crazy time. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this, and I don't think most people have in their lifetimes, where there's been a virus that's caused as much panic. SARS and MERS, if you look at the numbers, like MERS, I don't think more than like 1,000 people were ever even infected in the U.S. or I don't even know the world. Like, I mean, the numbers are so small compared to this. And SARS, I think, was a little bit higher, not as deadly as MERS, but yeah, I mean, here you have like a flu-like spread, but with a SARS and MERS-like, death rate. So that's what makes this scary. And again, like the market generally does a good job of doing things correctly on a mass scale. But here, I think it's kind of become a little bit into too much of a. I mean, I don't know if it's too much of a panic, but the fact that you're selling everything, I think is the wrong thing to do. And in those situations, it's like, how do you find the right things to buy? That get grouped around with everything else. Like I gave that example of the medical clinic company. That shouldn't matter. There are other companies that if you listen to their conference calls, they'll say, hey, we have a lot of inventory in stock. So if our supply chain gets hit, we still have inventory there to sell our products and get things out the door and still make money. So there's not a disruption there. So I think here is the time to invest in, companies that have been prepared. Obviously not, they didn't plan on something like this happening, but it's a good opportunity to find companies that have inventory, that aren't too levered up. I think a lot of private equity type investments where they've done a lot of these leveraged buyouts. I think they may start seeing, depending on how long this lasts or what the actual effect is in the U.S., I think you may start seeing some issues there in terms of distress. The other thing also is if you can find companies that do well in times of distress, this could be a good opportunity as well too. So yeah, I mean, I think companies that buy closeouts and resell closeouts or auction distressed assets, I think those are good companies to look at on a micro level. And then also, I generally look at the U.S. based companies, but one of the great things about being MicroCap is that you can control what markets your companies that your company sell to, that you invest in, or where the products come from. So if you're a U.S. producing company and you have U.S. customers only, U.S. revenues, none of the stuff has really affected you yet, or
Right.
it shouldn't. So the question is what happens like in the U.S. specifically. And so I'm a little surprised how like the Russell 2000 and the LD Micro Index. Shout out to LD Micro and Chris. Like certain indexes that don't have as much international exposure compared to the S&P and the Dow, have been affected just as much, if not more. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the way to think about it. Like I think Peloton, for instance, I don't own shares. I don't really do much, but I think that was like listed on CNBC. I was watching. And it was listed as, we're a remote stock. But I don't think people are going to go out and buy Pelotons because of the coronavirus. I don't know if it's going to add users. I think people who have one will probably be like, I'm happy I have one. I can still work out, if I'm on lockdown or something of that sort.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think people are going to add that. I mean, I think something like Zoom, which I don't own shares of, that's a more of an interesting type of, investment, or I can see why that's done well in this environment, because just like me and you are chatting remotely right now, I think that's going to happen more. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting times. I'm looking forward to getting the opportunity to buy things at a low price. So if you have cash on the sidelines, I think, right now you're happy. I'm happy. I have a good amount of cash right now that I can deploy, fortunately. And yeah, I think that's kind of the way to think about it, is to try to time the bottom, I think is very, very difficult. And so, that's basing on when human behavior and trying to analyze, when does the mass market figure out when this bottoms out,
And not only that, you don't know. I mean, it's so fast, especially, I got it pulled up right here. Like, 1 second it's down 800. Next thing it's only down 500. I mean, it goes so quickly.
Yeah, I think the hardest thing here to figure out is like, what's the truth, first of all, like what's actually happened. What does this actually do? How does it spread? I think there's so many unanswered questions that no one really knows yet. and you don't know, like even the name of the virus, like, we're calling it coronavirus, and then I forget if the CDC or the WHO comes out and says, oh, it's COVID-19.
Right.
Like what do you even call this? Like it's still just like so uncertain. And I think that's what's causing the panic is, nobody likes uncertainty. Humans naturally hate uncertainty, and that makes sense. No one, it's how we're wired. So it's like if something's uncertain, what do? You run away, right? If someone's coming to attack you, it's a fight or flight response.
Right.
So, and that's really what's happening here, at the core base of things. So, again, how do you take advantage of it? Which is what we're trying to talk about. I have a few ideas, a few things here and there, but again, just looking long term. It sucks to see your portfolio down or your net worth down. What is it, like 15% or so on a market level right now. But again, like looking out longer term, like unless you need that money right away, it really sucks. But if you don't need it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, like we're going to look at this as like, probably looking back, it's going to be a great opportunity to get in. So yeah, I think it's just important to buy good assets where time is on your side, where over a long period of time, it's going to be worth more than it is today. Try not to use much leverage as another thing I think is important. So you can go through these tough times because, who knows if we have lockdowns in cities where, people are quarantined or they can't get out of their house to go travel or do anything. That is going to be an issue. But it's not going to last forever. Like again, I at some point China's going to come back and it's going to be running again at full strength. And so, yeah, I mean that's kind of the way I think about it.
Got it. So Sam, with that, where can my audience go and find more information about you and Ridgewood Investments?
So I would recommend going to ridgewoodinvestments.com. We actually write weekly articles there, so it helps. So I manage a small microcap fund at Ridgewood. But our firm does financial advice for high net worth individuals, business owners, pretty much anyone that in situations like this, especially needs someone to hold their hand and help and guide them through it, and remind them that this is not a time for you to go and sell everything. This is a time, if anything, to start buying things, and this is an opportunity to get assets at a discounted price. And so. Yeah, I mean, it's really important. Like one of the things I think that it's good to mention. Sorry,
no, you're good.
Is that it's important to have a strategy before times like this happens, so that when times like these go on, like you already have a strategy in place, and you're like, I'm not going to be part of the panic. I'm not going to go and change my behavior because of something that. Again, if you look out logically long term, it's a short term thing. Again, depends on what your timing is in terms of short term. For me, looking at a year, 2 years, I still think is short term. I think 2 years, maybe 3 years and above is longer term when it comes to investing. So, yeah, I think that in the short term, it doesn't even really matter what happens as long as you invest in good assets. So, again, having that strategy in place makes you feel more comfortable and confident with that when there is panic and there is blood in the streets, you're able to actually, buy things and do the opposite of what feels comfortable.
So if I could summarize, coronavirus, don't panic, look for opportunities, think long term.
Yes, exactly.
All right, cool. Sounds good.
And you know what, Bobby? Things will probably get worse because in the reality, our day-to-day lives, has it affected it? No, not in the U.S.
Yeah.
And so, again, it could only get worse from here in terms of what it actually affects us. But again, the range of outcomes is huge. It can go any way. So, and if it does get worse, I think we have China as an example where it can bounce back. I think Singapore is also doing a good job. So, and you have to have confidence in the U.S. Our system here, I think, is better than most, and we are one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So, I think that should help in terms of fighting any health pandemic. So
let's hope so.
Yeah.
Sam,
thank you, Bob.
Thank you, man.
Always love chatting. Appreciate it.
Same here.